Okay, so now that we have a solid direction for the scenario where we create an order item and add it to an order, I think it's time to revisit that unit test that we commented out a lesson or two ago. You'll recall a couple of lessons ago, we commented it out temporarily so that we could flesh out the part service and the part classes, and we've done that in the previous lesson. So now we're ready to tackle that original unit test. I'm in orderservicetest.cs, and we're looking at near the bottom of that file. So first of all, I'm going to remove the multi-line comments, like so. And as you can see, there's still quite a bit broken here. And honestly, it may not even represent our best intentions for the design of the classes involved, specifically the order service, the order, and the order item classes. So I think what I'm going to do is address this first issue with the part service. Now, we know that we would expect to pass in an iPart service repository instance. And so we're going to create that and fake it easy, and we'll need to pass it in. So let's go ahead and set all that up. And to do that, I'm going to go to the very top here. And I also know that I'm going to need to pass in the string part ID. So I'm going to just go ahead and create a constant for that as well while I'm up here. String valid part ID equals part ID. Okay, so we got that. That was the easy part. And the next thing we want to do is to create a private member. So iPart service repository called part service repository. And then we'll create a fake by going to part service repository equals a fake iPart service repository. Great. Okay. So now I can revisit the unit test, and what I want to do is pass in this part service repository. So that's the first step. And as I'm looking at this, my eye is drawn to the actual name of our unit test. I realize that this name no longer matches what I'm trying to do in the unit test. What I want to do is create an order item, not necessarily add it to an order just yet. So I'm going to refactor this a little bit, and I'm going to call this, instead of add, I'm going to call it create order item. Valid order item, it actually creates the order item. Okay, so that's good. All right, next I've already taken care of this. Let's move on to the get part ID. I think that name of that function now is get by ID. And we passed in this valid part ID, which I just created as a constant a moment ago, so that's good. And the next thing I want to do is, I know I'm going to need this value. It can be a constant, or I only need it probably in this unit test, so I'm just going to create it here. So var quantity equals 1, and that should take care of that. And instead of add order item, we want this to be create order item. So I think that more appropriately addresses what I need to do, and I'm going to need to take a look at our order service. And you can see that we don't have that implemented, so we'll have to do that in just a moment. We'll have to implement this create order item method. All right, but I want to turn my attention before I do that to the act and assert parts of my unit test. And so I'm going to change a couple of things here, specifically around the assert. So this is the act that I want to perform. I want to create and then test this create order item to make sure that we are indeed getting a valid order item. And so I'm actually going to blow away everything that I had here before, because it's no longer valid given the intent of this new unit test. So here we go. I'm going to do a few assertions. And how can I make sure that I have a valid order item? Well, I can start testing the properties of it. So I have a new order item instance now, and I can make sure the part is actually this part that we retrieved here. So the property part on my order item is correctly set to the part that I passed in. All right, so that's one way to do it. We know we're going to need a quantity, and we'll want to make sure that that equals this quantity variable that I created here. I'm going to also need a price We're going to store that in the order item. So order item dot price, and we're going to set that to the constant valid part price. So part price, and that would require me to create a constant called valid part price. So let me go ahead and do that, because I can see me using this in other unit tests. So I'm just going to put 50 as that value, and I might change that, but we'll start there. And then finally I'm going to assert R equal the order item, and I'm going to need a line total, which is simply the quantity times the price. And so I'll just go ahead and do that calculation here. The valid part price. Great. Okay. All right, so I have a moment of angst whenever I come to something like this line total. Should I create a property just to store this value when it can be easily calculated? I'm always conflicted about that whenever I get to these calculated fields. In the end, I decide to go ahead and leave it. It might come in handy and make processing easier somewhere down the road. So we'll go ahead and leave it as a property of the order item. All right, so I need to make a few final tweaks before I can move on. So the one in particular that I need to make at this point is an expectation for part. So for the part service. So call to the part service repository dot get by ID. When you see that they pass in a valid part ID, then we want to return a new part DTO, and that part DTO will have a part ID of the valid part ID, and then it'll have a price of the valid part price. And let's go ahead and style this up like so. Great. And then also I'm going to want to create a mapping for AutoMapper. I know I'll need that, so I'll go ahead and do it now. Create map, and it will be a part DTO, and I want to map that to part. And that should just about do it. Made a lot of updates, but now we're focusing on just the creation of the order item in our unit test, not overstepping into the work of the order itself, and we're going to save that for another lesson. So now we need to implement the properties on the order item class and implement the create order item method that we defined here. So based on the unit test, let's go over to the order item, and let's go ahead and implement those properties. So we're going to hold a reference to the part satisfy the quantity property. The price. And the line total. Okay, great. And then I want to go ahead in the order service, and we're going to add the create order item. So return an order item, create order item, and what do we expect in again? I may have to review the unit test. A part and a quantity. Okay, so part, and then the quantity. Great, and so var order item equals new order item, and let's go ahead and get rid of that. We want the part equal to the part that's passed in. The quantity will equal the quantity that's been passed in. The price will be equal to the part's price. And the line total will be equal to the quantity times the part price. Okay. And then finally, we'll need to return our order item. Okay. All right, so let's go ahead and run our unit test and see where we're at. We should have satisfied the unit test by adding those properties and methods, and it looks like we have success. Okay, so great. I tried to think of a case back in, as I'm considering other tests to actually create here. I tried to think of a case where I wouldn't be able to create an order item. What could I pass to create order item where it wouldn't actually create an order item? Maybe where the quantity is 0. I didn't consider that. That probably would be something I would want to test for to ensure that the create order item would look at the quantity and say, hey, it's 0, and throw some sort of exception back. I didn't account for that in my notes, so I'm not going to add it right now, but that's probably something I would want to check for. But other than that, off the top of my head, I can't really think of an exceptional case. I mean, we covered the possibility that the user inputs an incorrect part ID into fat fingers the part ID, and the get by ID would throw an exception that that's an invalid part number. I think we created that exception in the previous lesson. But while I stare at this for a few moments, I do wonder about putting create order item in the order service. Is that the right place to implement the create order item method? Or should it be delegated the responsibility of creating order items at all? Or should that responsibility belong to another class? Maybe it should belong to the order class. Well, that's a tricky question to answer right now for me. I really don't know the answer just yet, but I decided to keep an eye on it and see if I gain some clarity as I move forward. So, okay, I think we're good to move on and talk about the order in the next lesson, so we'll do that. We'll see you there. Thank you.